Objections?
Would you like to sit here or you?
That's fine. That's fine.
Well, okay. Thank you very much for very quick but very comprehensive overview of global economic terrain and some of the major issues for the global economy. The general picture is rather positive, although there are risk factors, and so we're going to have a pretty good year this year and next year, but perhaps not as good as last year. But in any case, you pictured covered the global trend very fast but very convincing way. And you touched very briefly on Korean economy. I suppose there are questions and comments from the floor. Since Mr. Gurria has to leave here at 8:30, so please make your questions as brief as possible and just get to the point. Okay, Mr. Kim and Mr. You just make your question very brief.
Thank you for your very dynamic talk. I would like to ask a question, and before that I'd like to say one quick comment. You touched on the global imbalance, and I think this is everybody's concern. That is, great deficit in the part of the U.S. and accumulating surpluses on the outside. I think it's a very big problem as you look at that. But if you look at the world at large, it is very much in balance. That is, U.S. deficits offset by surpluses elsewhere. It seems to me that the faster we work to break down the barriers between regions and national borders, the problem will just go away. So as an OECD head, I hope that you think about it in that direction. My question concerns specifically Russia. Russia was very humble and very accommodating to Western ideas, democracies, etc., when Putin needed a lot of money. But he got a lot of money these days from oil rich. And then we see tremendous change in his attitude, Russia's attitude. And most recently, last couple days ago, we heard that he was canceling, well, Russia is canceling Sakhalin 2 project, ostensibly for environmental reasons, but everybody suspects it's because he just wants to gain more Russian interest in the project. But Russia is very much interested in joining OECD, and therefore he has to be talking to you very often. I would hope, and what rather I would like to know, is what you have in store to suggest to the Russia to become a good member of OECD in the future, to start behaving right now as a good member of the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Russia asked to join the OECD 10 years ago. And 9 years ago, we said yes. That's it. They have not joined yet. You're right. My impression is that maybe 10 years ago, Russia felt that it required the embrace of the OECD as a way to tell to the world that they were back in the market economy. And today, maybe they are the single largest exporter of oil now, not potentially the largest producer, but today they are exporting more than Saudi Arabia, which is quite remarkable if you think about it, if you include gas and oil. So basically they're getting $500 million or something like that every day in exports just of energy. So they feel less vulnerable maybe. And of course, joining the OECD is not just a question of signing in a form and paying a fee. You have to adopt a certain number of conventions, a certain number of understandings, a certain number of guidelines, and what we call the acquis, or the culture, the way of life of the OECD, if you want. And there's something called like-mindedness, which is a guide to potential accession. And this basically talks about values, principles, and best practices also in the day-to-day conduction of business, not just about politics or democracy or philosophy, but also about business. So All these things are being taken into account. I now have a mandate to look hard at the question of enlargement and the engagement, because in many cases what I said is, okay, so we do not have new members, but we have to engage with Russia, with Brazil, with India, with China, with South Africa. We have to engage. We cannot ignore them. So we're working very hard with China. For example, China, we did the survey of China's economy. We did agriculture for China. We did the sector of regulatory issues and governance issues, and right now we're doing the environment, which promises to be very interesting. Actually, today I am delivering the environmental study of Korea to the President of Korea, and also we're going to present it with the Minister of the Environment. So we're doing some things we're doing India this year. We're doing the survey, economic survey of India, and we have done Russia before. So we are engaging with the non-members, but this is the ultimate political decision by the members of the OECD who they accept as a new member. And the problem is that for the last 9 years, Russia really has not become a member. There's, I think, growing signs of frustration on both sides. And my concern is that we should not let it drift away. I think we should engage. If they're not full members, we should engage vigorously in a good dialogue with them. Yes?
Yes.
My name is Jacob Lee Pogo, Yale University. One of the short question. It's regarding to the world rule-based world you mentioned. As the OECD members increased very much, are the peer pressure, P-E-I-R pressure, decision making, and OECD guiding principle, Eurocentric, is still exists and guiding principle?
There are 30 members in the OECD, of which 19 are members of the European Union, plus 3 more that are members of EFTA, European Free Trade Agreement, which are Norway, Sweden, and Iceland. So effectively, of the 30 members, we have 22 European members. 22 out of 30. Who are the non-Europeans? They are the APEC. Korea, Japan, New Zealand, Australia, Mexico, United States, Canada, and Turkey, which is not APEC, not Europe, not Asia, not quite, and which is not yet member of the European Union, but is founding member of the OECD. Remember, the OECD was the Marshall Plan originally. So the countries that had strategic value were part of them, and that's why Turkey is still negotiating to join the European Union, but is a founding member of the EU, of the OECD. So it is Eurocentric in the sense that it's one country, one rule, one vote. This means not IMF, World Bank based like quotas, shares, which is like a business. Here, Luxembourg vote is the same as US vote, at least theoretically. And in practice, as ambassador, God knows, one small country can block anything. They do. We sometimes have very great difficulty, for example, with issues with Europe, because Cyprus comes up in the list. So sometimes Turkey will block decisions because Cyprus is in the list. So it's a very difficult situation, because this is OECD has nothing to do with this problem. At the same time, we are becoming the fighting ground of another war, that we have nothing to do. So some decisions get blocked. for these reasons. So, Eurocentric, I would say, yes, but less than you would think. Because Europeans themselves are very aware of the fact that if they are very obviously Eurocentric at the OECD, the other non-members will lose, the non-European members will lose interest. And let me just take a fast look at the number. APEC countries, only 7 countries out of 30, they pay for about 60% of the OECD. Now, I say we, you know, it's like the fly that is walking, that is standing on the back of the bull. Huh? Say, we are working, you know, we are tilling the ground here. But if you add United States 25%, Japan about 22%, then Mexico, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Korea. Altogether we are like 60% or maybe more. So only 7 countries pay for 60% and all the others pay for 40%. So from the point of view of financing the organization, it's not so Eurocentric. Actually, it's APEC-centric. And the problem is when you are talking about expansion. Because when you're talking about expansion, you still need, I said, of the European Union, there are 19 members that are already in the OECD. Say, but why? The European Union is 25. Well, there are 6 little members that are not yet members of the OECD. But from the economic point of view, they do not add very much, but at the same time, that would be 6 votes. So it would become even more Eurocentric. So from the point of view of governance, that's a big challenge. So when you're talking about enlargement, when you're talking about new members, when you're talking about engagement, you have to talk also about geographic balances. This is what members have in mind.
Okay. Let me ask you 2 questions. First, as an OECD chief, and the other as a former Mexican decision maker, policy maker. The first, I know you already had the Korean country report, but for our audience, you said many nice things about Korea and the way the current Korean economic status. But from OECD's vantage point, what are major policy issues the Korean government has to deal with? Since you are recommending some of the policies and suggesting some of the policies, you must have some of the concerning areas for Korea. And what advice would you give to Korean government to deal with these issues in terms of policy priority? That's one question. Second question, as former Mexican cabinet member, how you personally evaluate Mexico's joining NAFTA, the free trade FTA with the United States? Because we have various negative reports on that FTA, although there are many, many positive things already occurred for Mexican economy. You, as a former cabinet member, for the benefit of our audience and the press here, could you tell us how you personally evaluate the Mexico's joining FTA?
Let me start with this one, with the last one. The FTA, NAFTA, is a positive experience for Mexico. We have multiplied by 5 our exports, and we have multiplied by about 10 our exports to manufacturers. Also, NAFTA has provided more foreign investment flows. NAFTA has provided more jobs, typically the best paid jobs, because they are the export sector. And NAFTA has provided a lot of technology, a lot of associations, a lot of challenges. Mexico actually practically has no trade deficit. It has a huge trade surplus with the United States. That's because we export a lot of oil. But our trade surplus is higher than the totality of our oil exports, which means that we have a surplus also in merchandise. Being next to the United States is not so bad from the point of view of the business. There's a famous phrase by they attributed to a dictator of Mexico in the early 1877 or 1880. He said, "Poor Mexico." He said, so far from God and so close to the United States. And I remember that I went to Israel once, and I mentioned this to Shimon Peres, and he said, "Oh, please let me borrow the phrase. I will use it exactly the other way around. I say, poor Israel." He said, "So close to God, so far from the United States." So I thought that was very revealing of relative priorities of countries. You know. The other thing is that President Scalfaro of Italy, he said, "Oh, Mr. Gurria," the foreign minister, I went to receive him at the airport, said, "If only Italy had 100 kilometers of border with the United States, only 100 kilometers, Italy would be one of the most important countries in the world." And I said, "Yes, Mr. President, so would Mexico." The problem is we have 3,000 kilometers. But anyway, NAFTA was almost an organic thing to happen with Mexico. The integration is a natural thing to happen. We have not had integration of people. Movement of people is not yet organized. At some point it will have to be. But we have a problem with, effectively, with some products. But people are saying products are like grain, like agriculture, this is a problem. Well, very simply, grains are not going to liberalize until the year 2008. So, we still do not see the consequences. But let's take the numbers are very definitely in favor. And the Mexican producers, I'm sure like the Korean producers, have been up to the challenge. I have absolutely no doubt that if you sign a free trade agreement with the United States, you will be in good shape. What is the logic of a free trade agreement between a very large country and a smaller country? The logic is the small country fits several times into the big country. That means the possibilities of increasing the export from the United States to Korea are more limited than the possibilities of Korean exports to the United States, because the United States is a huge market. Of course you have to compete with India, you have to compete with China, you have to compete with Japan, you have to compete with everybody. But you've always had to compete anyway, but you didn't have the access. Now you're going to have the access. That's the difference. The other problem is that a free trade agreement today is less interesting than it was 10 years ago when Mexico signed NAFTA, because there are many more free trade agreements in the world. But it's still better than not having one. Signing free trade agreements scares people in the smaller country. It scared the Mexicans. When Mexico was negotiating with Central America, it scared the Central Americans so much that we gave technical assistance to the Central American negotiators to negotiate with us. But of course, what has happened with the free trade agreement between Central America and Mexico? Their exports have increased by a multiple of the speed with which ours have it, simply because of the relative size. The theory is very obvious. It's not even an economic theory, it's a theory of physics, you know. A little bit fits several times into a big space. So, I would encourage you, negotiations, the devil is in the details. Negotiate hard. Take long tenors, long delays in some cases, in some sectors where you need still. The only problem is you can be part of it, because everybody will be asking for 15 years. No, it doesn't make any sense, because that doesn't. Agriculture is very sensitive, but it puts a test. And very frankly, you should think of yourselves as a country that has grown for 50 years at 8% on average, or the last 10 years at 6% on average, that has doubled its or tripled its GDP per capita, and that is now converging with the OECD. Now you are at 70% of the GDP per capita of the OECD. You're big boys now, boys and girls. That's politically correct. So you're ready, and or you'll never be, because all the concerns that you have now will always be there. Except now there are conditions in the United States. There may not be going forward. Today the United States is much more protectionist than it was when they signed the NAFTA with Mexico. So I'd say if there's a window of opportunity, jump. Jump through the window. Take the jump. Take the heat. Negotiate hard. Give yourself the time, but take advantage of the opportunity. You'll do well. Challenges of Korea. Let me just mention a few. I speak under the control here of Mr. Jones, who is a great expert in Korea. He actually was a resident of Korea. He speaks Korean. He's a great expert, really. And I'd say if I have to pick one structural problem, is the aging process of Korea, together with the consequences of the aging process, which is the pressure on the pension system and the pressure on the welfare system and the healthcare system. I would choose that one as a phenomenon that has to be addressed, because it can produce fiscal pressures and fiscal consequences of rather important size. And you are getting old, so is everybody else, but the problem is you are now having a negative dynamic of population, which means you are losing population in absolute terms. More people are dying than people are being born. And therefore, I think here it's 1.06 or 1.2 or something like that, which is way below the replacement rate. This means that, I remember recently the State of the Union address of Putin. He did not speak about the Americans or about energy or about, Chechnya. He spoke about demographics. About why the Russians, if they don't do something about it, in 40 years' time they're going to be 100 million rather than 150 million. So this changes completely the outlook of a society medium term. It implies also you have to consider the question of migration in order to substitute for some of the work that is not being done by the Koreans. As the Korean economy grows, less people, then of course you have to organize yourself to receive flows of migration that will be doing part of the job. So it has very serious consequences. Fiscal, it has enormous consequences. Fiscally, it's very important because people will retire at 58 or 60, will live until they're 90. Right now, your you have increased to 78% 78 years, which is convergence with the OECD. Your expected life expectancy in Korea, you have increased that 25 years, by the way, in a generation, which is quite remarkable. But of course, it puts a lot of problems on the system. So I would say that one is big. Maintaining high growth and shift from keeping the productivity-based growth rather than just the export-oriented. That means the world is just getting more difficult. Competition is getting tougher, and but that's no secret for you. You've been competing successfully now for a long time. You have leaders, some leaders in the world. You're applying IT and ICT quite well, so but you just got to keep at it and invest even more in R&D, invest even more in education towards the discovery of new knowledge to then apply it to the markets. Greater connectivity between universities, government programs, and companies to use the talent of the universities and the installed capacity of universities. So, the only thing I can tell you, if you feel that I'm being critical, is that I would probably say this of every single country in the OECD, except it's a question of degrees. But I would say very uniquely, the problem of aging is quite the development of the social safety network. Also because your network does not capture everybody. It's complicated in the replacement value. That means how much people will make after they retire as a percentage of what they were making before they retired is maybe too high, but it doesn't capture everybody who is going to be without a job. And then some issues that have to do with labor markets, some rigidities in the product markets, over-regulated product markets also have to deal with that. Entry of competitors into the markets. It's a question of balance, I would say, but it's a question of challenges that everybody is facing. How to best address the resource of education? What level do you give? As you are aging, you move up the ladder, first primary, then secondary, then high school, then universities, then lifelong learning. Because you don't want people to leave the job too early or be fired because of reorganizations. And then you basically do not want a social security system that is conducive to people staying unemployed, because it is attractive to stay unemployed. In Korea it doesn't happen that much, but you have some cases in Nordic countries, for example, where it pays to stay outside of a job. You don't actively seek to be re-employed, basically because it's attractive. So you got to get those things together. But those are some of the issues. There are some issues in the environmental area, which I will mention when I present the environmental study, having to do with the fact that you spend a lot of energy per unit of GDP that you produce. You're one of the highest energy spenders in the OECD per unit of GDP, but that's because of the nature of your manufacturing system. So that's it. Those are some of the issues.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think we have to end here. Although we have a couple of question sheets submitted, but I think we will have...
I will leave you my text,
okay,
which I did not read necessarily, but for the record.
We have to release him. He has to go to another meeting soon. And really appreciate you sharing with us and view on the global and Korean.
Thank you all very, very much. Thank you.
we all wish you a very successful tenure at the OECD. Thank you.
Okay.